Loud music played in the cafe. The master of ceremonies kept the guests from getting bored. He organized fun contests, delivered toasts. At the long table sat the relatives and friends of the young couple, loudly shouting "bitter" for them to kiss. The young bride, in her snow-white dress with bare shoulders and fluffy skirts, looked like a fragile angel. The groom, in his strict gray suit, appeared serious and reserved next to her. Relatives looked on approvingly and emotionally at the beautiful couple at the head of the table. The groom's friends glanced at him with undisguised envy and cast admiring looks at the young bride, now his wife. The oldest at the wedding was the groom's grandmother. 80-year-old Mrs. Vera, a slender, intelligently looking old lady with a fashionable haircut of gray hair, dressed in a dark blue strict dress with a white lace collar. She didn't drink much, ate little, kindly observed the fun, and remembered her own wedding 60 years ago. "How do you not get bored, Granny? Maybe we'll dance?" Her grandson Igor, heated by the dancing and champagne, sat down on a chair next to her. "Where to me?" "Dance with your wife, and I'll watch." She had a question. "And where do you plan to live after the wedding?" "Where?" "We rented an apartment, parents helped with money." Igor dabbed his sweaty forehead with a handkerchief. "I've been thinking. I have a large apartment. Plenty of space, in the center. It'll be yours when I die anyway. Live with me. It'll be more fun for me too. I'll help however I can. And you don't need to spend money on a rented apartment." Mrs. Vera looked at her grandson with love and warmth. "Oh, Grandma, you're something. And Mom said not to impose our company on you under any circumstances. And you won't regret it? We'll cramp your style a bit. And Daria, I love her, of course, but I don't know what kind of housekeeper she is." Hinting that there might be trouble in quiet waters? "We'll see. You can always rent an apartment if we don't get along. I'll free up a room for you tomorrow. Maybe I'll even get to dote on some great-grandchildren." Mrs. Vera smiled cunningly. "Thank you, Grandma. You're gold." Igor kissed his grandmother on her wrinkled cheek. Daria approached in a cloud of snow-white lace and silk. "Grandma made us a gift. Offered to live with her. The house, by the way, is a historic monument of the capital." Igor hugged his young wife by the waist. She lowered her eyes, hiding a triumphant look under her fluffy eyelashes. "We'll try not to cause you any trouble," the girl said sweetly, smiling. The young couple was swept up by the rhythmic music into a whirl among the dancing pairs. The next day, Mrs. Vera went around her possessions, choosing a room for the newlyweds. The living room is large, bright, but a thoroughfare. Not very convenient for the young. The former nursery is too small. I'll probably settle there. But our bedroom with my husband is just right. Bright, spacious, with a separate entrance. Just need to clear out the wardrobes." And she spent the day quietly moving her things around. Only in the evening did she sit down on the sofa to rest and dozed off. "Vera, what you're planning isn't right." Her husband looked at her sternly and frowned from beneath thick eyebrows. "Why didn't you consult me?" "But how? After all, you—" Mrs. Vera began and stopped. "Do you really think I see nothing from here? My soul aches for you." He shook his head reproachfully and disappeared. Vera startled and woke up. Her heart beat unevenly and fast, her mouth was dry, and she barely opened her heavy eyelids. It took a moment to realize that Grigory had been a dream. She had seen him so clearly, heard his voice. A bad dream. It's been a long time since he visited me in dreams. And indeed, why didn't I consult? Maybe I rushed, offering the young ones to live with me. But what's done is done. She looked at the photograph on the bookshelf. What now? You can't take back words. And what could happen? It's not strangers I'm letting live here, but my own grandson and his wife. And the girl doesn't seem like a scammer or a seeker of city husbands. It was just a dream. She brushed off the bad thoughts. The next day, a large black car pulled up to the entrance of the high-rise building, from which Igor got out, followed by Daria, who jumped straight into the open arms of her young husband. She looked up at the tower crowning the roof of the ancient high-rise and gasped in delight. "We're really going to live here. All the girls will be jealous of me. Can I invite them over at least once, otherwise they won't believe me? As for friends, that's up to Grandma. She's not strict, but she likes order." Igor kissed his wife, and arm in arm, they entered the building. Igor left Daria in the care of the grandmother to get acquainted with the apartment, while he went down for their things. Daria walked through the rooms with high ceilings, amazed. She looked out the window, where the Capitol sprawled out before her like on the palm of a hand. She expected to see antique museum furniture, but Mrs. Vera explained that they, too, when they were young, wanted modern furniture, though it's not fashionable now. "This is your room." The grandmother flung open the door in front of Daria. "This was our bedroom with my husband." "Oh, how beautiful." Daria almost clapped her hands, but stopped herself under Mrs. Vera's amused gaze. The old lady understood the young wife of her grandson. She too was young when she arrived in the capital in '56 to study acting, but the theater school did not accept her. She did not return home to her small, partly ruined village. Soon she met a young metro builder, got married. Her husband's career swiftly ascended. They were given this large apartment. A daughter was born. Over time, from a provincial, timid girl, Vera transformed into a dignified lady with good manners. "Is this your husband?" Daria pointed at a photograph in a frame on the bookshelf. "He looks so strict." "Yes, he died 12 years ago." Mrs. Vera glanced at the photo. "Good girl." "And why did you, Grigory, doubt her?" "Scolded me. Igor will not let me be offended. I'm lonely without you." "It's better with them than alone," she sighed. The young ones were gone all day, only returning home in the evening. Mrs. Vera did not regret inviting them to live with her. There were no troubles with them. She slept poorly, rose early. For breakfast, she prepared pancakes, porridge, or cheese pancakes, to Igor's delight and Daria's shame, who was not used to getting up early and could not yet cook deliciously. During the day, while the young ones were not home, Vera rested, giving in to her habits. Autumn passed, winter came, and warm April arrived. One day Daria came back from the institute earlier than usual. Vera, startled at the sound of the unlocking door, looked at the clock. "Why are you so early?" "Something happened?" she asked worriedly, coming out to the hallway. "I feel nauseous and dizzy." Daria indeed looked unwell. "All clear," Mrs. Vera nodded significantly. "Young business. I thought it would happen to you faster." She smiled understandingly. "What will happen?" Daria opened her eyes wide in fear. "It shouldn't." She bit her lip. "It's normal. I'll make you some tea now." When the kettle boiled, Mrs. Vera entered Daria's room. "Maybe I should bring you a cup here?" She looked sympathetically at pale Daria, lying on the bed. "What?" "I'll come now," she said, waiting for the old lady to leave the room. There was a ring at the door, and Mrs. Vera went to open it. When she returned, Daria was sitting at the table, where 2 cups and a teapot were set. "That was a neighbor." She returned a debt. "You've already poured the tea. Good job. Here are some salted crackers. They won't make you nauseous. They were my only salvation back in the day." Mrs. Vera put a plate on the table and sat down opposite Daria. "Drink in small sips. Don't rush." Daria looked into her cup, not raising her eyes to Mrs. Vera. "Embarrassed? Silly girl." Vera pitied her and sipped her tea in small sips. "The tea tastes strange, don't you think?" asked Mrs. Vera, not noticing Daria's startle. In the evening, she suddenly felt sick, vomiting a brown sludge. She ate little, only fresh food, hence always looked slim and active, despite her advanced age. But at night, she felt even worse. On trembling legs, pale and disheveled, she knocked on the young couple's room. "Igor, I feel awful. Call an ambulance." She barely whispered, fighting nausea. Igor jumped out of his room, laid his grandmother in bed, and called an ambulance. "What hurts?" "Grandma, hold on. They'll arrive soon, give you an injection. It'll get easier." Igor sat on the bed next to his grandmother, holding her wrinkled, icy hand. "My stomach is burning. I feel awful, Igor." Mrs. Vera whispered barely audibly and glanced at Grigory's photograph. It seemed to her, or did Grigory look even more reproachfully at her? "Grandma." "No. Grandma." Igor caught her gaze. "Don't even think about it. Everything will be okay." Daria also came out of the room, offering water. But Vera shook her head. Any mention of water or food made her nauseous. The ambulance arrived 20 minutes later. Mrs. Vera was carried downstairs on a stretcher and into the vehicle. Igor went with her to the hospital. He waited in the reception area for an hour and a half. Finally, a doctor came out and informed him that his grandmother was out of danger, but her condition was severe. "It looks like an overdose of medication, or was your grandmother attempted to be poisoned," said the doctor, looking intently at Igor, who didn't immediately grasp the significance of the statement. "Does she take heart pills or for blood pressure?" the doctor asked. "She takes some. But I don't know exactly. We've pumped her stomach and put her on a drip. Your grandmother is sleeping now." The doctor shook his head. Igor shivered under his gaze. Igor took a taxi home. There was no point in going to bed, as he had to get up for work in an hour. He peeked into the room he shared with Daria. She was sleeping on her side, knees pulled up to her chest and turned towards the wall. The blanket had slipped off her and was hanging down to the floor. Before, he would have tiptoed over, adjusted the blanket, and kissed her on her warm, soft cheek. But now, conflicting feelings and thoughts tore him apart. His little wife, beloved, bright as the sun. And suddenly an overdose of medication, or someone tried to poison your grandmother. He remembered the doctor's words. Igor left, quietly closing the door behind him. Who could have done it? The grandmother never forgot anything. She even in conversation didn't pause, searching for the right word. She couldn't have forgotten and taken the medicine several times. She loved her Grigory, but not enough to intentionally shorten the time of their separation. She was old, anything could happen naturally soon. There were hardly any strangers in the apartment. Only Daria remained. He remembered how he was struck by her provincial spontaneity, beauty, and modesty at their first meeting. He was head over heels in love with her. He wanted to protect and shield her from all the troubles in the world. And yet, as painful as it was to think about Daria's guilt and what happened, suspicion fell only on her. Why? She has a motive, as the detectives say. Came from the province to the capital, got admitted to a university, not a prestigious one, but still in the capital. Swept a city boy off his feet, got married. The apartment. For a while, Mom also speculated that Grandma could swap apartments with them, but she only allowed dreaming and talking about it with him and Dad in their own kitchen. Grandma herself offered us to move in with her after the wedding. She loved me, spoiled me more than Mom did. Lord, how difficult. I need to talk to Daria. Maybe she has an excuse, proof of innocence? Igor's brain worked clearly but slowly. He went to the kitchen, scooped 2 spoons of ground coffee into the pot, added water, and put it on the stove. He stood and waited for the water to boil, thinking. Then he ran to the grandmother's room. No pharmaceutical packages on the bedside table. The medicine box was found in a wall-mounted kitchen cabinet. Next to it on the shelf were 2 containers with pills. Igor searched for their instructions online on his phone. Yes, one is strong, an overdose threatens. He read a long list of possible complications, each of which could cause irreversible effects on his grandmother. The container was half empty, the medicines accessible, one only had to open the cabinet. Could Daria have slipped them to the grandmother? Or not? And if not her, then who? When he introduced his future wife to his parents, his father didn't hide his opinion about provincial girls who want to marry a city man by any means. And his friends openly hinted at Daria's mercenary love for him. He didn't believe it. He drank the strong, bitter coffee, and it was quickly getting light outside. I'm not ready to hear the truth, I don't want to. But someday she might want to get rid of me too. Igor shuddered, a wave of heat washing over him at the thought. Enough. Damn, what can one come up with? I've already cast my wife as a murderer. Igor smirked humorlessly. You haven't gone to bed? Igor flinched at the sound of Daria's voice. How is Grandma? She stood in the doorway of the kitchen, wearing shorts and a tank top. Grandma? Better. The doctor said there's no longer a threat to her life. He spoke, staring intently into her eyes, afraid to miss the slightest reaction, a hint. But Daria looked back at him innocently, uncomprehendingly. Threat? I thought she had simple poisoning or indigestion. It happens to the elderly. She was attempted to be poisoned. Igor spoke the words clearly and slowly. Poisoned? Who? Why? Her eyelashes fluttered, her eyes widened in surprise. You can't fake that. Or. I've known her for less than a year. What do I really know about her? Igor grimaced in disgust at his own thoughts. With my suspicion, I'm killing all my feelings for her. Enough. Time to stop. He mechanically brought the empty cup to his lips. A few bitter grains got into his mouth. Igor grimaced, chewing them. The sound of water running came from the bathroom. Lost in thought, he didn't notice Daria had left the kitchen. Igor opened the cupboard door under the sink and dumped the sediment from the cup into the trash bin. How did he not realize it immediately? He picked up the bin. At the bottom lay a milk carton and candy wrappers. Pushing aside the bright candy wrappers, he immediately saw a plastic pill bottle. The very ones that cause a lot of complications. The bottle was empty. Thoughts swirled in his head. If the grandmother herself threw away the empty package, there should be almost a full one in the cabinet. But there were less than half the pills left. Again, it doesn't add up. Or rather, it does. Igor put the bin back. The thought of fingerprints on the bottle flashed through his mind. But he stopped himself. I'm starting to play detective. Daria will say she dropped the package. Picked it up to put it back in the cabinet. He rinsed the cup and splashed water on his face. When Daria came out of the bathroom, Igor was putting on his shoes in the hallway. Leaving already? When will we visit Grandma? She asked innocently. They're not letting anyone see her yet. The doctor said she shouldn't be disturbed. I'll call, find out how she is. Maybe we'll go tomorrow? He lied and hated himself for it. Igor, what's happening? Daria, with a towel on her head, smelling of aromatic shampoo and shower gel, stepped close and looked into his eyes. Just tired. I didn't sleep, remember? He forced a smile and ran a finger down her temple, wiping away a drop of water. See you in the evening. Igor. Daria called after him, but he had already slammed the door behind him. Igor barely made it through the day at work, went home early. Daria hadn't returned from the institute yet. His heart raced, palms sweated when he found the trash bin under the sink completely empty. So, Daria destroyed the only piece of evidence. Was it worth going to throw away trash just for an empty milk carton? Hardly. Well, this also speaks not in her favor, he thought disappointedly. He sat at the kitchen table, in the thickening evening twilight, pondering when Daria arrived. She turned on the light, saw Igor, and flinched in surprise. You scared me, she said with a trembling voice. We need to talk. Sit down, he pointed to the chair opposite. Just a moment. I'll change. She turned to leave. You have time. Sit down. Igor almost yelled. Daria timidly sat on the edge of the chair and looked at her husband fearfully. You slipped the pills to Grandma, causing an overdose. Why? Are you lacking something? Is she in your way? I didn't slip anything. Her voice trembled, tears welled up in her eyes. Igor, how can you? Tears streamed down her cheeks. I wish I could believe you, Daria. An apartment in the center of the capital isn't worth my grandmother's life. Sooner or later, it will become ours, yours. How can we continue living with this? I won't be able to trust you anymore. I'll file for divorce tomorrow. We don't have joint property, no children. They'll divorce us quickly, without a court. You're mistaken. Daria's voice suddenly grew stronger. She smirked, crookedly. I'll disappoint you. The divorce will have to wait. I don't understand you. Igor, confused, couldn't take his eyes off his wife, as if he was seeing her for the first time. From the gentle, quiet girl, a fragile angel as her friends called her, she suddenly became bold and self-assured. Silently, Daria took a folded ultrasound report out of her purse, unfolded it, and placed it on the table in front of Igor. He read the ultrasound conclusion twice, before the meaning sank in. Why didn't you tell me? His voice trembled now. I didn't have time. Igor detected neither tears nor remorse in her words. Daria stood up and left the kitchen, closing the door firmly behind her. Igor sat for a while, lost, his gaze shifting between her and the paper on the table. What if it's true? Sometimes a lie seems more believable than the truth. Then he went to their room. Sat on the edge of the bed where Daria lay. She looked at him, waiting. I don't like what happened with Grandma, what's happening between us now. It turns out I don't know you at all. I won't file for divorce just yet. But you can't live here anymore. Until Grandma returns from the hospital, I'll rent an apartment, you'll move out. Pray to God everything will be all right. I don't know what to do, how to feel about you. It hurts me that you tried to poison Grandma, but I can no longer trust you. Just tell me, why? Daria didn't justify herself, didn't cry, didn't beg for forgiveness. Igor spent a restless night on the couch in the living room. No matter how much he pondered, he couldn't decide what to do. Should I rush to conclusions? Grandma is alive, I'm going to be a father. Maybe, with the baby's arrival, everything will fall into place? Perhaps, she couldn't resist the temptation and the desire to hasten events. Igor finally fell asleep, leaving time to help make the right decision. There are two remedies for all misfortunes: time and silence. Silence. Silence.